Short-term rentals are a $100 billion market that have reshaped global tourism, accelerated a nationwide housing crisis, and created fortunes for early adopters. But now, customers, the government, the public, and the hosts themselves are turning their back on a concept that started out as a fun alternative to stuffy hotel chains, but became everything wrong with modern real estate.
All right, the party's over for Airbnb renters. The company said yesterday that its temporary ban on parties and other large, noisy events is now permanent.
I've put all my savings into my unit. I'm following all the rules, paying all the taxes, buying the business license.
Ultimately, our goal is to get more housing back into the housing market for people to be able to rent.
I just uncovered a massive amount of debt that Airbnb hasn't paid. On the books that they're hiding. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions, possibly even $1 billion plus of debt that they have not paid.
So we are looking around and are saying, what can we do right away that makes more homes available?
The short-term rental market took off when Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia tried to rent out a spare room with an air mattress to attendees of a conference because they realized all of the hotel rooms had been booked out. They called their service Air Bed and Breakfast, which was later shortened to the short stay app that you know and love or hate today. Airbnb is now worth more than hotel chains like Hilton and Wyndham combined. The company is by far the largest short-term rental company, and it has achieved excellent penetration into markets around the world where other similar peer-to-peer or network market apps like Uber, DoorDash, Lyft, and even Amazon have failed to take share away from local competition. It was a good idea. Customers loved it for giving them a cheaper alternative to outdated hotels, and hosts like the opportunity to earn extra income on a spare bedroom or even an entire separate property. But the four parties that make the short-term rental market work, the customers, the hosts, the public, and the platforms, are all now dealing with four unique problems that are threatening to undo this market and take out a lot of other real estate investments with it. The first problem lies with the people who it's hardest to feel sorry for, the hosts. Airbnb and other short-term rental platforms provided a unique opportunity for people to profit off real estate in a totally new way. Having a roommate existed long before Airbnb, but the platform let homeowners offer their spare rooms to travelers who could pay up to triple what a long-term roommate would pay, since budget was the reason that they were looking for a roommate instead of a place of their own. The extra income was nice, but the added flexibility of a short-term roommate was the biggest appeal to most people. If you had an extra bedroom to rent out in your apartment, you could find a long-term roommate. But then you run the risk that they are the type of person who is messy, loud, doesn't pay the rent on time, or is just a clash with your own personality. With a short-term tenant, any problems are only going to last as long as their short stay. Other advantages are that payments are handled through the Airbnb platform. There was a rating system that controlled bad behavior, and if you ever wanted the house to yourself because family was coming over or just wanted a quiet week to yourself, it was as easy as blocking out those dates on the app. That was the early value proposition of Airbnb. But sharing a spare room and staying with a random person while on vacation only appealed to a certain type of alternative traveler. Most people who Airbnb are putting up entire properties for guests to use as exclusive accommodations. Instead of a short-term alternative to a roommate, the market became a short-term, higher-yielding alternative to conventional long-term tenants in an investment property. Property owners could make as much as double the rent from short-term stays after paying Airbnb fees than they could from long-term rentals, even if their property was only rented out for half the year. The downside was that short-term rentals required more effort because the property needed constant cleaning between stays and there was less guarantee of consistent income. But financial benefits were still clearly in favor of short-term rentals for properties close to cities and tourist hotspots. Large-scale Airbnb landlords, the Airbnb barons if you will, designed properties with the express intention of cutting down on the effort required from them. They fitted doors with keypad locks that could be changed remotely between guests, easily cleanable surfaces, inexpensive but fashionable fittings, and preferred properties with minimal landscaping. All of this cut down on the additional efforts hosts needed to put into managing a property. But like all good things, it didn't last forever. Airbnb advertised its platform just as hard to new hosts as it did to guests, and investors started buying multiple homes to turn them into Airbnbs. Some hosts turned managing their Airbnb properties into a full-time job, effectively purchasing a job as a hotel general manager. Other hosts took an easier approach. Realtors in high tourist areas started offering short-term property management services where, just like they would manage traditional long-term tenants, the realtors would instead manage the short-term rentals, with some services even handling the listing on Airbnb. Their fee was higher, but the higher short-term rental price meant owners still came out ahead. The additional cash flows from higher-yielding short-term rentals also made it easier to qualify for more home loans because the additional income could be used to pay for the loan on the next property and the next property. The inevitable result was clear. For little additional effort, hosts could make more money from their properties, so the market became oversaturated and hosts started to struggle to rent out their properties enough to make it worthwhile. Short-term rentals also made long-term rentals more expensive, so the gap between what someone can make from a short-term rental versus what they can make from a long-term rental is narrowing. For many hosts, it's no longer worth the additional risk and effort to rent out properties short-term, and for the others that could only afford their loans because of the higher rent they got from the short-term rental yields, they might be forced to sell. That's just the first group in the collapsing market for short-term rentals, and they were one of only two that were in any way responsible for the shitstorm to begin with. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why short-term rentals got so big and failed so quickly. Short-term rentals were a good solution to a real problem. Traditional hotels had become overpriced and didn't cater to what a lot of people really wanted when they went away on vacation. Hotels provide a lot of amenities like housekeeping, room service, restaurants, concierge desks, meeting rooms, gyms, spas, pools, valet parking, and 24-hour security. These services are nice, but they come at a price which is either directly baked into the price of a room or charged separately at a significant markup. These services also don't always align with what the vacation goers really want when traveling, which is a place that just feels like home in a different city. Airbnb cut out a lot of amenities that catered more towards business travelers and offered vacationers their own kitchen, multiple bedrooms for their children, and an element of privacy that couldn't be purchased at any hotel chain. It felt like a home away from home because in many cases, it was just someone's home. Airbnbs were also much cheaper, especially when sharing a larger home between multiple friends or family members who would all need to book their own separate rooms if they were staying at a hotel. A study conducted by the University of Waterloo and Daniel Gutentag Hospitality Research surveyed customers booking Airbnbs in traditional hotels. The study found that 61% of all correspondents said that they chose the Airbnb as a budget-friendly alternative to even budget hotel chains. Despite the company's marketing as a way to share the vacation experience with a local host that can show you around a city, most respondents said that they did not care about this aspect of the service, and 70% stayed in a home that they had all to themselves, so they didn't have to share space with a random stranger. Despite people actually preferring not to share their short-term rental with a host, Airbnb still spends billions every year promoting this aspect of their service for a really important reason that will come up later.
Get an Airbnb and get a place to yourself.
Anyway, the things that made Airbnb are now either being lost or offered by competitors in 3 areas. The first is price. Airbnb is no longer an affordable alternative to budget hotels. It is now a premium option competing with premium 5-star chains. According to the company's own data, even though the number of bookings has only increased 17% since 2019, the gross value of all bookings worldwide has increased by 67%. Airbnb is just not cheap anymore. The second area where the platform is losing out is its monopoly on homes away from home. Hotel chains have significantly increased their offerings of apartment-style accommodations that do away with typical hotel services in exchange for larger rooms with multiple sleeping areas and kitchens. To many customers, these semi-serviced apartments offer a better value because they combine the known consistency of a hotel chain with the space and price of an Airbnb. The third area that turned customers against Airbnb was service. Hosts wanted to cut down on the work they needed to put into managing their properties, so they started putting more unrealistic expectations on guests about cleaning up before they leave.
Exorbitant cleaning fee, that will irk people, especially if you, the person staying there, has to pretty much clean the house themselves.
Overall, this is just a few bad hosts, but it has given the platform a bad reputation amongst customers who expect to be charged cleaning fees on top of already high rates. Compared to a hotel, where as long as there is not permanent damage, housekeeping will handle everything free of charge. If Airbnb's business was being a middleman platform between hosts and guests, then both of these groups having a bad experience is not a good direction for the company. But there is another group that has had it worst, and who are involved in the app whether they like it or not. And that's a third reason for the Airbnb bust. The public is sick of it. Customers can choose to stay wherever they want, and the threat posed by Airbnb and other short-term rental options has forced existing hotels to improve their offerings. Hosts were investors who need to accept that all investing carries risk. Most of them still own a home or multiple homes that they can now lease out in an overpriced rental market or sell likely for a profit. Neither of these groups have lost, unless they were really stupid. The people who did lose, though, were priced out of their homes because it became more profitable to rent to vacationers than long-term residents who needed a place to live. Poor renters don't have any power over the platform itself. But the problem of unaffordable homes in certain cities is becoming so bad that politicians are introducing new policies that will limit how many short-term rentals are allowed to exist and charging hosts additional taxes for running unregistered hotels.
If hosts are not playing by the rules, this legislation will require platforms to take down those listings.
Other cities have just made short-term rentals illegal without the same licensing as a normal hotel, making it so expensive that it's not worth it for the hosts to bother. The other group cracking down on short-term rentals are the people who you would least expect to be the heroes in a story about housing: homeowners associations. Owners associations in apartments and suburbs that have them are blocking owners from renting out their homes to short-term stays because residents who live in their homes don't like loud parties and additional security risks that come with the short-term guests. Some hosts are simply ignoring these laws and taking the fines into account as a cost of doing business. A report from McGill University's urban planning professor David Walksmith found that 45% of all short-term rental listings in Los Angeles are illegal in one way or another, and that the city could have levied between $56.8 million and $302.2 million in fines in 2022 alone. The semi-legal approach to rentals is still working for some hosts, but it's creating problems for the platform. Airbnb is spending hundreds of millions of dollars across the world fighting legal battles for the right to operate, and that's why they still spend so much on advertising their service as a way to see a new city with a local host. Even though most of their properties are rented out as whole new homes where a guest will never even see the person that owns their home, it's much harder to regulate shared short-term stays because it's harder to distinguish them from someone just staying with their friend. The folksy image of someone sharing their bedroom with curious travelers who want to see a new city with a local is much better PR than a multi-millionaire or institutional property investor who has just listed their 10th home with a tech company worth $80 billion. And that's the fourth cause of the Airbnb bust. The platform is losing its control on guests, hosts, and the general public. Airbnb has always had competitors like VRBO, but now incumbent traveler sites like TripAdvisor, Booking.com, and Expedia are launching their own short-term rental platforms like Turnkey or incorporating them into existing sites that already aggregate listings from multiple hotel advisors. Airbnb charges a host fee of 3% to the people listing their properties and a service fee of 14% to guests. Some hosts have found it cheaper to advertise their properties through local agencies and split these savings with guests. Airbnb has about the same amount of technical overhead for a vacation stay as Uber has for food delivery or rideshare, but Uber can only make a few dollars off a small charge, where Airbnb can make hundreds of dollars from their 17% cut of every transaction. This has made the platform profitable where other peer-to-peer platforms have struggled to turn a profit, which is a great advantage in today's high-interest rate environment, but it has also painted a target on the back of the company that has no competitive moat around their business model. Apart from their brand name and recognition, there is nothing to stop these new entrants entering the marketplace from taking market share away from Airbnb by offering a better service or charging lower fees. The bonus fifth reason behind the Airbnb bust was that the platform was never set up with longevity in mind. It has made billions in just a few years, and for its founders and early investors, everything else is just a bonus. Companies are doing mass layoffs while complaining about not being able to find enough employees. Some workers are min-maxing the system by working multiple full-time jobs at the same time, while others need to work hours of unpaid overtime at just one job. This is not to mention that the gig economy is consuming entire sections of the workforce. The 9-to-5 was created by American labor unions in the 1800s and became mainstream over 100 years ago, when jobs looked like this and this. It was revolutionary for its time. But how many of the modern problems in corporate America are caused by trying to make an outdated system fit with every single modern job?
To the U.S., 8.4 million people in the nation are working multiple jobs.
850,000 jobs. Wages went up for American workers.
Instead, they're working multiple jobs. It's called being overemployed.
And one part-time, but I need both of them to pay my bills every month, my rent and groceries, so just working all the time.
A report by the management consulting firm McKinsey & Company found that 2/3 of the average human's wealth is in the work they can do over their lifetime. Everybody has time, effort, and experience they can trade for money, and those tradable commodities are worth twice as much as all the other assets that the average person possesses. A regular 9-to-5 job has been a great way for billions of people to safely exchange a predictable amount of their time for a predictable paycheck, with predictable career advancement as they gain more experience. But this one-size-fits-all model for work doesn't fit with every job, and trying to make it work has been bad for employees and bad for companies for 3 reasons, which is causing 3 equally terrible trends in the job market. The first trend is that it makes time a worthless asset. The Ford Motor Company was one of the first businesses in America to adopt the 9-to-5 40-hour work week. Henry Ford did this to make his company the most attractive place for auto workers to get a job. This allowed him to pull talent away from other automakers without paying his workers more. In order to compete with Ford, other automakers were forced to offer the same 40-hour work week with paid overtime. Eventually, in order to compete with the automakers, other companies were also forced to offer 9-to-5 jobs so that their best workers didn't quit and go and work on the car assembly line. These auto workers had tightly defined and repetitive tasks, so unless the workers succumbed to exhaustion, they could do a consistent amount of work for every hour they spent at their post, and every additional hour would produce the same amount of output. If you work in a modern office job, you will know that your work is nothing like this. Sometimes there is a lot to do, and sometimes there is nothing to do, but you still need to be there 8 hours a day looking busy no matter what. Back when the 40-hour week was being fought for by workers' unions, most Americans worked in manufacturing. But today, most people work in the services sector, which is more diverse than you might expect. Unless you are working on a farm or in a factory, you are a service worker, and your job could be anything from making strategic corporate decisions to making coffees. Clearly, these jobs are very different, and should have a different schedule, but most of the corporate world has tried to make the 9-to-5 fit all jobs. But this doesn't work, because no service jobs have tasks consistently delivered on a fine-tuned production line. Work comes and goes as internal and external customers make demands, and that means when people are busy and need to do more than 8 hours in a day to finish their work, they are expected to work, quote, reasonable unpaid overtime. According to an ADP Research Institute study of office professionals, unpaid overtime jumped to an average of 9.2 hours per week in 2021. More than a full extra day to keep up with employer demands. But when there is little to no work to do because a project has just been completed or sales are seasonally slow, workers are still expected to put in the 40 hours a week because that's what the business is paying them for. If you're in this kind of job, your best option is to try and find something that makes you look busy. But if you don't have something to work on, you are probably going to be given meaningless tasks just to fill the mandatory 8-hour day. If this was just another story about companies screwing over their workers with outdated business practices, it wouldn't need a video. But the 40-hour workweek isn't even good for companies. According to data from the US Census Bureau, McKinsey & Company, and compiled by Statista, growth in gig work and freelance jobs have outgrown typical permanent jobs by 500% over the last decade. Gig work apps have become very popular with unskilled workers due to their low barrier to entry and flexible working arrangements. Someone with a phone and a bike can start working for a food delivery service like Uber Eats, Postmates, DoorDash, Grubhub, or all of them all at the same time in less than an hour by filling out an online form. This has been a highly appealing alternative to minimum wage jobs that still rely on the antiquated process of handing in a resume, spending weeks doing job interviews, only to still get ghosted by a fast food joint offering $7.25 an hour for an unpredictable schedule. Gig work jobs usually also pay terribly, but people get to work as much as they want, when they want, and they can work around another full-time job for extra money. Even with all of the problems of gig work, you can see why it has become so popular. The popularity of freelancing and private contracting has also exploded. This is more popular among skilled workers who can sell their services to businesses just like an employee, but with no ongoing agreement. They are only paid when there is work to be done. Private contracts are usually an agreed-upon price for an agreed-upon outcome, like $10,000 to build a company website, but they can also be billed hourly for roles like security, administrative assistants, or on-demand workers. According to a report by the management consulting firm Oliver Wyman, healthcare workers have been one of the fastest-growing groups of workers ditching typical permanent roles in favor of working as private contractors. On-call nurses, doctors, and hospital support staff already work unpredictable hours, so they don't sacrifice much by working as contractors instead of a direct employee. According to the report, some nurses have elected to work in the temporary staffing market so they can take on fewer hours as mental health has become a top priority for workers in the industry. Private contractors in all industries are usually paid more for their time than permanent employees because the business only pays for the hours of services they actually need, which means most of the time their total out-of-pocket will be lower. With mass layoffs dominating the news cycle, people are also finding out the hard way that if they work in an at-will employment state, their 9-to-5 doesn't give them much security anyway. So, workers at all skill levels are seeing they can make more, and businesses are realizing they can cut down on expenses by doing away with the rigid 9-to-5 workday, which is the second reason it's slowly becoming a relic of corporate history. But the death of the 9-to-5 is not going to be a good deal for everybody. Unfortunately for now, businesses are going to be the biggest winners out of this shift. even if they have to pay their contractors and gig workers slightly more per hour. The first loss is benefits. If you work as a private contractor, you are becoming your own boss, which means that even though you are making more money, there is overhead that you become responsible for. Benefits like paid time off, training, retirement plans, accounting, and health insurance are going to come out of your pocket. Health insurance through a regular employer is normally far more affordable than private options. For gig workers, this can be especially tough because health insurance premiums for people who ride motorized scooters through late-night traffic to deliver food to people's homes is simply unaffordable on the income of a delivery driver. Even if you are doing highly skilled contracting, if you don't manage these expenses carefully, you will end up with less in your pocket than if you just stuck with a regular permanent position. And your loss is their gain. According to a survey conducted by Forbes, small and medium enterprises were hiring more contract workers because it simplified their accounting and reduced the ever-increasing expenses of human resource management. It's not just small companies either. According to CNBC, contract workers have outnumbered direct employees at Google and other large tech companies since 2018, and the ratio became even more skewed during COVID. Google already has large human resources and accounting departments, so they are pursuing contract work for two other reasons. The first is that the most talented engineers have realized that they can make more money working off one-off projects for lots of companies than they could by being a full-time employee with just one company. The demand for talent during the good times meant that these companies just had to pay what these top engineers were asking. Some highly specialized engineers could bill up to $10,000 an hour for their work to these companies. Even for a company as rich as Google, it was better to pay them only for the hours. They really needed them, instead of paying them millions of dollars a year as a permanent salary for the odd project where their skills would be needed. The second reason is that during bad times, like right now, getting rid of contractors doesn't count as layoffs, so companies can easily cut expenses without technically laying off any staff. Big layoffs signal to investors and other employees that the business is in a bad shape, and that they would be better off investing their money or building a career somewhere else. There are three groups that are really going to benefit from the death of the 9-to-5. But their gain is all at the expense of one big group that statistically you are a part of: the regular workers. Entry-level workers who can get gig work are not paid well, but they weren't paid well in minimum wage jobs either. They have just gained some flexibility to work when they want. High-skilled workers who can move to contract roles can make a lot of money by working for the highest bidding company. They only lost the idea of job security that never really existed for them anyway. Companies are also taking full advantage of the death of the 9-to-5 by cutting down on their biggest expense center. The losers are regular workers right in the middle who are in roles that can't be gigified but aren't in demand enough to be contracted out. The fixed expenses of operating as a contractor, health insurance, business licensing, accounting, and everything else means it's only worth it for people earning well over the average wage. If you are earning $60,000 as a permanent employee, you would have to charge $80,000 a year as a contractor to break even. And not many businesses are going to pay that $20,000 premium for a standard job. New regulations intended to protect contractors and workers are another problem. If a contractor files for unemployment after their job is completed with a company, they can file an SS-8 form with the IRS, which can trigger an audit to determine if that contractor and other contractors working for the company meet the requirements to be counted as a permanent employee. If they do, then the company has to cover their unemployment benefits and has to provide other benefits to every other contractor in the business as well. Businesses don't want to take that risk, so they use staffing agencies to handle all the compliance for them. According to data from the American Staffing Association, most contractors now work through middleman staffing companies. For contractors working through these middlemen, it can combine all of the problems of permanent employment with none of the benefits of being a private contractor. And that's the third reason why the 9-to-5 is going extinct. It lets companies pull some creative business maneuvers. Stop me if you've heard this one before. An entry-level job paying $8 an hour with no benefits at an unremarkable company. Oh, and they want you to have at least 3 years experience in a similar role and preferably a master's degree. Why the f*** are entry-level jobs not entry-level anymore?
The latest jobs report found widespread hiring.
One man's quest to find a job is raising questions about the labor shortage right now. He says he applied to more than 60 entry-level positions.
Particularly strong in hospitality, leisure, and healthcare.
We have created more jobs in 2 years than any presidential term.
Searching for a job is a difficult and time-consuming task. Most Americans do not have enough savings to survive for more than 2 weeks without going into debt, which means it is also stressful. No matter how efficient the hiring process is made, you are never going to have fun looking for a job, and nothing can change that. but the corporate world has introduced a lot of obstacles that make the job of finding a job as painful as possible. Filling out online forms for information already on your resume, going through multiple rounds of interviews, and getting ghosted by hiring managers for hundreds of positions is enough to drive anybody mad.
Responded to me. 4 of those went on to a phone call after an email exchange, and then 1 of those turned into an interview. 0 of them turned into a job that was actually desperate for help.
It's also simply bad business. Attracting the right talent is vital for business success. If businesses make their application process too difficult, they are going to filter out everybody but the most desperate candidates, which are rarely the best candidates. Companies that ask for multiple years of experience from applicants applying for entry-level jobs also expose themselves to a similar risk. It might sound advantageous for the business to get an employee with years of experience that they can pay like a fresh graduate, but company management frequently overlooks the reason that these applicants are looking for entry-level jobs in a field they have been working in for years, and it's that they are not that good at their job and they need to keep moving companies before their poor performance catches up with them. A recent study conducted by Portland State University and published by the Harvard Business Review found that overqualified candidates did not outperform the control group, and that paying significantly under market rates for talent will cost most businesses more in other areas. Bloated hiring processes are also expensive. Sponsored job postings on sites like Indeed, LinkedIn, and Glassdoor can cost hundreds of dollars per day, easily more than the successful applicant will be paid once they are on board and working. Multiple rounds of interviews also take paid hours from HR, hiring managers, and third-party recruiters. Recruiters work on a commission basis for successfully placed candidates. But if a company makes candidates go through multiple rounds of interviews, the recruiters can ask for a higher fee, or they will be incentivized to send their best recruits to companies that have a simple hiring process so they can get paid quickly and reliably. It's bad business, and good company managers know it, but there are 3 reasons why they still do it anyway. The first reason is that it's become too easy to apply for a job. Indeed has 60 million monthly users, and LinkedIn has over 200 million. Online job boards make it easy for applicants to apply for hundreds of jobs every day based on convenient filters that let them search results by industry, seniority, experience, and salary range. Companies can get several thousand applications for a single position, because the optimal job search strategy has become spamming your resume into as many positions that vaguely fit the description of the job you are looking for. Companies have attempted to adapt to this by having landing pages where users can fill in their details into the company's own database by manually completing an online form. These forms typically ask for information that should be included on any good resume, but it enters it in a way that can be read by a computer instead of being read by a hiring manager, saving them the time of manually going through thousands of applications by hand to find the attributes they are looking for in a candidate. The backend of these forms will enable the hiring manager to search through the candidates by a similar set of filters that the candidates themselves use to find the job posting, evening the arms race between the volume of applications and the people that check those applications.
You're quantifying human behavior, human expressions, human voices, turning that into data.
We're now using artificial intelligence to help companies find the very best talent.
Some companies have started using application tracking systems, or ATS, which use AI to scrape resumes for keywords to populate databases that can be filtered in the same way without requiring candidates to fill in a data entry form themselves.
And most likely you were being analyzed by an algorithm. How does that make you feel?
I feel like that would blindside me entirely.
This practice has become so common that there are now AI tools like Getty, JobScan, and Rezi that check resumes against job posts and make sure that they are appealing to the AI system that check resumes before the hiring manager does. So, an AI will write a resume to satisfy another AI to stand out against thousands of other applications also written and checked by AI. Applying for a job has become easier than when you had to search the classifieds and call companies one at a time. But this means people can apply for more jobs. More applications means that the acceptance rate at each job is much lower. And the best way to deal with this low acceptance rate is to apply for more jobs, which means that applying for a job has become harder all over again. Nobody is to blame for this new paradigm. I love making fun of dumb corporate decisions on this channel, but in this case, they are just reacting to new technology that has made finding applicants easier than ever, and everybody else is reacting to the same thing. The competitive meta of job searching has shifted from a firm handshake to mass spamming resumes to get past increasingly difficult spam filters. But that's just one reason, and there are plenty of things that companies are doing which are just dumb. The second reason that companies have made it so difficult to apply for jobs is because they want to cover their ass. There are lots of reasons why a hiring manager might want to pick one job applicant over another, but not all of them are legal. And even if they don't violate any equal opportunity laws, some might be a bad look for the company. By listing lots of unreasonable job requirements, the company increases the likelihood that no applicant will tick every box, which means they can hire whomever they want and cover themselves by saying all of the other candidates were missing one or more of the role's prerequisites. It's rare that companies get much pushback over rejecting an external candidate. Most people have just become accustomed to never hearing back from a majority of jobs they apply for. If you have ever applied for a job recently, you will know that no response is the new rejection letter.
First time.
If companies do respond, they try to keep it as generic as possible so that they do not expose themselves to any potential unfair hiring practice lawsuits, which makes the long list of job requirements redundant. Where these do help companies, though, is in rejecting internal hires. According to a study by Cornell University, internal hires outperformed outside hires, but only because they are more familiar with the business from day one, requiring less training to get into a new role, and because they were more likely to stay in a job longer than the outside hire. A similar study by McKinsey Consulting found that a strong culture of internal promotions helped with staff retention and encouraged staff to work harder to qualify because they could see it paying off for them.
The pandemic, a lot of companies are not flush financially, so they can't afford to hire a new person.
Internal promotions are effective, but they are also more difficult than outside hires. If you get promoted or moved around within your company, then someone else needs to be hired to fill your role. And if someone gets promoted to fill your role, then HR has to fill 3 positions instead of just 1, which is expensive, difficult, and triples the chance that someone won't be able to perform their new job. People hired internally also don't have probationary periods, so if they do underperform in their new role, they are harder to let go. Internal hires have advantages, but external hires are easier and present less risk. If a company has no strong internal candidates for a new role, but it doesn't want to lose the benefits that come from occasionally promoting people from within, then the most effective strategy for them is to increase the job requirements so they can tell their existing staff that, unfortunately, they don't qualify based on the job's criteria. I know I say it a lot, but this is another reason why the best thing you can do in your career in your early years is to consistently apply for new jobs that are better than the one you currently have. Workers that change their jobs every 2 years earn on average 50% more than their colleagues who show loyalty to a company. Sticking around might get you a promotion, but there's no way to know how long it will take for other people to move out of their positions. Having experience at different companies is also more valuable to new employers than long-term tenure at a single employer. When employers ask for 3 years experience, they are often satisfied with candidates that talk about dealing with similar challenges in different industries. So you should apply anyway and just have some kind of experience to talk about, even if it's not doing the same job or even a job at all. And that's the third reason why employers make job requirements that are so out of touch with the job they are offering. They want to see how applicants deal with the challenge. There is an old saying in business that even if you are not in sales, you are in sales. Most people do not have jobs that require cold calling a list of leads to generate revenue, but those soft skills are still important in every job. Dealing with difficult customers, difficult coworkers, being able to present a strong argument, or simply showing empathy for a client's needs are all skills that can be demonstrated by an applicant when they are questioned about a shortcoming of their qualifications against the job requirements. If you're in a job interview and can provide a strong response to a question like this that eases the interviewer's concerns without disregarding them, you will probably end up doing better than someone who didn't even have that experience gap. If you can deal with an interviewer's concerns, then you have clearly demonstrated that you can deal with the other challenges as they are presented to you, a skill that is worth more than anything you can write down on a resume. And that's the fourth reason. Some managers do know what makes a good hire, but most don't. People are promoted into management positions based off having experience in a subordinate role. Managers are therefore naturally inclined to believe that when it comes to hiring someone, more experience is more better. It's a reasonable assumption that someone that has practice in a role should be better than someone with no practice. In fact, I said it at the beginning of this video and you probably just accepted it. But corporate roles in non-technical fields change so rapidly today that the benefit is negligible. A 30-year-old study conducted by the Internal Congress of Applied Psychology in Madrid found no strong correlation between experience and job performance. Since this study was published, follow-up studies including a publication from the Harvard Business Review in 2019 found the same thing. Most corporate managers do not read journal articles about statistical correlations between hiring parameters and job performance. Most go off their own experience, which is the value of experience. They do the same for other job requirements because the safest move for them is to find a candidate that ticks the most boxes. LinkedIn is one of the strangest social media platforms in existence. Where else can you find people bragging about working unpaid overtime and writing appreciation posts to the company that just laid them off? It's a really weird website. But is it hurting your career?
I learned the value of, if it's good for the company, then it's good for me. There are so many values I learned while working at this company. Hashtag proud to be unemployed.
LinkedIn is a strange place where people talk at length about how great they are at their job to look enticing to potential future employers.
LinkedIn to me is like this weird cesspool of corporate culture that feels like corporate culture, but from the perspective of its high school.
In 2006, when the company was founded, it was a strange concept, but it has worked for LinkedIn, which is now the 9th largest social media platform in the world. It had more monthly users than Twitter before both sites were acquired. Elon Musk and a team of investors purchased Twitter for $44 billion in October 2022, a record sum for a social media company being taken private. Musk's controversial purchase beat LinkedIn's record from 2016 when it was taken private by Microsoft for $26.2 billion. Musk is often criticized for overpaying for Twitter when LinkedIn is the comparison. At the time of acquisition, LinkedIn had slightly more monthly users than Twitter, but also had something that the Bluebird just couldn't match. Every time you log into LinkedIn, you are giving Microsoft something unmatched by every other social media network in existence: value. If you are using a service for free, you are the product, and LinkedIn users are the most valuable product of them all. LinkedIn generated revenue of $13.8 billion in 2022, which is 2.5 times higher than Twitter's highest year of revenue ever. We don't have public financials on it now since it's a private company, but most analysts expect that Twitter's revenue is down since Musk's acquisition. The average LinkedIn user is worth 76 times more than the average Reddit user, 35 times more than the average Pinterest user, 4 times as much as the average YouTube viewer, and 3 times as much as the average Facebook user. This comparison is not 100% fair either. Users who log onto Reddit, Pinterest, YouTube, or Facebook spend a lot more time on the platform on average. Additionally, a site like YouTube is much more expensive to operate than LinkedIn, given the inherent differences in the cost of hosting HD videos and hosting content that is just text and pictures. LinkedIn is able to extract revenue from their users at the highest rate per hour in the industry, and when you are the product, that value is coming from you. LinkedIn achieves this in 4 ways. The first is by creating a digital marketplace for people. LinkedIn is the biggest job search site in the world. Companies and recruiters can post job listings and boost their visibility by paying LinkedIn directly. When you apply for a job through LinkedIn, the employer gets your skills, experience, education, and employment history on display in a consistent format, which is a big advantage over normal job search sites like Indeed. This information should be on your resume, but the standardized way that LinkedIn presents it lets recruiters automate their candidate searches far more easily. A subscription to LinkedIn Recruiter costs $9,000 a year, but it offers hiring managers and third-party recruiters a range of tools to search for candidates based on criteria, reach out to them directly, and advertise new roles. It's a small price to pay for most companies, because what they get in return is a buffet of potential applicants for their jobs. When you ask for a raise and give your manager the ultimatum of quitting, they weight up the expense of giving you a raise with the expense of replacing you. Finding qualified candidates used to be much harder than it is today, but now, if you quit, they are just a few keywords away from finding a perfect replacement from the largest collection of career-focused people in the world. Hiring managers would not pay $9,000 a year for tools that didn't provide a return on investment. Having the tools to reach out to potential applicants that aren't even actively looking for a job has given hiring managers a lot of power over you. And that's just the first reason. The second way LinkedIn is ruining your career is by creating an imbalance of information between you and potential employers.
LinkedIn is actually one of those things that's becoming more and more required, more and more requested on every single job application, and that is a big problem. And the main reason is LinkedIn just makes it way too easy to give too much information about yourself.
A good LinkedIn profile should have all of the information an employer would ever want to know about you. But company pages don't have any of the information you really want to know about a potential employer. Salary information is often not shared, and job expectations are kept as vague as every other site. LinkedIn is giving companies a database of employee information for nothing in return. There are some careers that require a higher level of sacrifice than others, and you should know that before going into them. If you want to work as a corporate lawyer or investment banker, you need to accept that you will need to put in long weeks and have little personal time in the first few years of your career. The same sacrifices are made by doctors who suffer through years of medical school and residency, but in exchange, they get a career path with a certainty of high compensation. It's not fair that you be expected to work like these people if you don't have the opportunity to make the same money as them. And that's the third way that LinkedIn is ruining your career, which is also one of the company's most lucrative revenue streams. It forces self-comparison. It's well known that overconsumption of social media is bad for your mental health because it forces you to compare your everyday self with carefully curated posts by friends and influencers at their very best. Instagram will make you self-conscious about not hitting the gym for 3 hours every day, but LinkedIn will make you self-conscious about your career. Career coaches recommend that you make as many connections on LinkedIn as possible because it expands your network and makes your profile more visible. I personally have over 1,000 connections on LinkedIn from my time in investment banking, because in the last years of my career, connecting on LinkedIn became more common than handing over a business card. My feed is now filled every day with thinly disguised brags about how someone became the youngest partner ever at their law firm, or someone else was thankful to have the honor to coordinate the synergistic digitization sprint for internal tools development, enabling their company to pivot to fields of disruptive innovation while empowering the customer experience. According to the company's own data, only 1% of monthly users post anything on the site, compared to around 20% of users who make at least one post a month on Facebook. People don't post their bad hair days on Facebook, and they won't post their career failures on LinkedIn, which can give you, as an observer, the impression that everybody is doing much better than you are.
And who can blame them? I mean, everybody on LinkedIn is essentially a saint, according to them.
LinkedIn and the marketing teams that leverage the platform know that this insecurity is one of the best ways to sell products. If you are feeling insecure about your career, you are going to be more receptive to ads selling services like career development training, leads generation, or job recruitment. You are also going to be more willing to spend money on a product that could increase your career earnings because it becomes easy to rationalize as an investment in yourself. According to Insider Intelligence, who runs an annual survey of 15,000 respondents, LinkedIn ranks highly among social media platforms that Americans trust most. It was in the top spot for 4 years straight, but just got edged out by Pinterest. The company's branding of being a professional place where professionals discuss professional things helps this reputation, even though it still takes advantage of the same human emotions to sell advertising space as every other social media site. That's not actually the problem, though. As a YouTuber, I am sympathetic to the fact that a company in the market for attention needs to monetize that attention to run a sustainable business. LinkedIn attracts a niche, valuable audience with high intent, and they should charge what people are offering to pay for impressions. LinkedIn vets advertisers more rigorously than other platforms like Meta's Ad Manager or Google AdSense. The problem that this actually creates for your career is that it forces you to think that you need to add more achievements to your page in order to stand out. According to the market research database Grandview Research, the American personal development market is worth $12 billion and expected to grow at a rate of 4.1% over the next 8 years. People are spending more of their money and unpaid hours to collect certifications like they are Pokemon gym badges. Recruiters and hiring managers love this trend because they are paid to put people in roles, and the performance of a new hire once they are in the job doesn't matter to them. Convincing the manager that will actually be responsible for the new hire is much easier when they have a long list of certifications to point out. There is no evidence to suggest that career development training has any correlation with job performance, and on the contrary, people that seek out meaningless tokens to boost their employability are more likely to switch jobs more often. LinkedIn didn't create this problem, but it did make it much worse, and unfortunately, that's what you have to compete with now. The 1% of people who actually post on LinkedIn also set the standard for working unpaid overtime, putting a job first, and blurring the lines between professional and personal domains. They do it to show off and increase their chances of getting a job, but since it's the only thing that gets displayed on the world's largest professional network, companies and managers start to think it's a normal expectation. The fourth way that LinkedIn is ruining your career is by creating a culture of corporate worship. Since posts on LinkedIn are not anonymous and people want to keep their jobs, any post that mentions a company is going to be overwhelmingly positive. Some companies strongly suggest that their staff have a strong presence on LinkedIn because they know it can help their image as a desirable employer. Corporate worship is not just weird, it can hurt your career. Big companies make it very easy for people to believe that they are doing something bigger than just exchanging their time and skills for money. Companies have been doing this for a long time before LinkedIn. Walmart employees have to recite their company cheer every morning because it helps with staff retention, but LinkedIn has enabled companies to push this kind of cringe corporate worship into the mainstream. The overwhelmingly positive feedback that LinkedIn gives companies also makes them less likely to acknowledge areas of weakness in their organization. Praise from identified members of a team is much easier for managers to address than criticism from an anonymous forum. Many don't stop to think that they aren't going to get negative feedback from people who just want to advance their careers, and that's the worst part. In most professional industries, not having a LinkedIn profile is seen as strange and unprofessional. For some companies, it can immediately disqualify you as a candidate. Recruitment agencies that specialize in tech and finance have publicly said that people without a LinkedIn account don't take their career seriously enough to be considered for jobs. So even though that everybody that uses the platform knows it's a giant corporate circle jerk, they need to play along to get the most out of their career. One of the most alarming trends to come from LinkedIn recently followed the wave of tech layoffs, where ex-employees wrote appreciation posts about the companies that just fired them. The employees didn't do it because they were grateful for the skills and experience they gained from their time with the company. They did it because it was the most corporate-friendly way to announce they were looking for a new job. These posts benefited the company more than the laid-off employees, but if it gave these employees even a slightly better chance of finding a new job quickly, many were willing to put their dignity aside and play along, which is something that they will probably be doing for the rest of their lives. Most people alive today will work until they die.
With high inflation and a suddenly shaky banking system, some Americans are cashing out their retirement funds.
All the things we would like our retirement system to be doing, it is doing.
Retirement is the career professional's promised land. Study hard at school, get a good job, work hard your entire life, live within your means, invest diligently, and you will be rewarded with endless free time in your final years. It's not much to ask for, but to most people alive today, it will only ever be a dream. A Bankrate survey found that 55% of Americans are behind on their retirement savings, and 10% don't even know where their retirement savings stand.
What's happening in the stock market, what's happening with inflation, even worries about taxation, it's really set me back.
Like most things are with personal finance, the numbers are even worse with young professionals. The National Institute on Retirement Security reports that 66% of working millennials have nothing saved for retirement. Even though 2/3 of millennials work for an employer that offers a retirement plan, only about 1/3 participate in the offer.
Oh, that is bad news.
Millennials are between the ages of 27 and 42. Many people in this group are at the peak of their careers, so these reports can't be attributed simply to young people just starting out in their financial lives. But who can blame them? The financial firm Fidelity recommends that you should have at least the equivalent of your annual salary saved by the age of 30, 3 times your salary at the age of 40, and 6 times your salary by 50 to be on track for retirement. I like to think that I am personally pretty good with my money. I have come from a career at an investment bank where I was earning a lot more than the average person my age, and I still got nowhere near these numbers. A higher income does mean the goals are higher, since this is based on multiples of your income, but it's easier to save when you earn more too. If you are actually on track with these numbers, I am genuinely very impressed. Let me know in a totally unverifiable comment in the comment section, and I will give you an equally worthless love heart reaction. But most people are well behind Fidelity's recommendations. The NIRS found, using the recommendations of financial experts, that only 5% of working millennials are saving adequately for retirement, and everybody else is probably going to be working until they die.
I feel like right now I could be spending on a lot more important things, you know, gas, because it's so expensive, school that's coming up for me. So I don't think retirement's what I need to be worried about right now.
There are 3 big reasons for these alarming statistics. The first reason is all of the obvious stuff. Inflation is at a 3-decade high. Millennials started their careers after the worst financial crash in a century. The cost of college is increasing 8 times faster than wages. Most young graduates are leaving school with 5-figure debt before they even start working. Renting even a 1-bedroom apartment is now unaffordable everywhere in the country for someone earning a minimum wage, and saving for a house is almost impossible in the expensive cities with good job opportunities. A New Yorker with a college degree would need to commit to 7.5 years of dedicated saving to have enough to make a down payment on an entry-level apartment. That dedicated saving can only start after they pay off their student loans, which now on average takes 20 years. After they buy the entry-level apartment, they then have a 30-year mortgage to pay off. If this person started working at 22, they would be 79 years old before they were a debt-free homeowner in New York in an ideal scenario. Variables like starting a family, getting sick, or earning less than the average college graduate would put them even further behind. And that's just reason 1. The second reason why most people will be working until they die is that people either don't care or don't want to think about it. As humans, we are great at putting off problems that we don't want to deal with, and retirement is one of those problems. Most personal finance experts, and even people pretending to be personal finance experts on the internet, will tell you that the most important time to start planning for retirement is your early 20s, as soon as you get started with a professional job. Ideally, you can even get started before that by working part-time through college so that you don't start out your professional career with too much debt. On paper, this all makes sense. If someone is hoping to have a 30-year retirement after they end their career and they want to live on $50,000 a year during that time, they would need approximately $1 million in well-invested assets to generate that income, assuming that market returns are roughly the same as they have been over the past 100 years. That return would be about 10% per year on average, but after tax and inflation, 10% returns turn into roughly 4% returns. Someone planning to only live on retirement can afford to spend more than they earn from their returns, because they can use some of their principal every year since they aren't going to need it when they are dead. People planning on a longer retirement by quitting their jobs earlier in life often subscribe to the 4% rule, which is based on a Trinity study which found that if someone only spent 4% of their portfolio's value every year, it should last indefinitely, with investment returns replacing living expenses. But we are not talking about overachievers. We are just talking about the average person that wants to fund an average retirement. And $50,000 a year is what most people would need to be comfortable and enjoy life in their twilight years. Starting at 20 years old, with a target retirement age of 65, someone would need to invest $100 a month until they retired to reach that target. If they wait until 30 years old, they would have to invest almost $300 a month, triple what they would have if they started at 20. If they wait until they are 40, they have to invest $800 a month. $800 a month for some people might be possible, but someone with that much disposable income also likely wouldn't be satisfied with $50,000 a year to live off in retirement.
I'm golden, baby. You can't do anything with 5, Greg. 5's a nightmare.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. Can't retire. Not worth it to work. Oh, yes. 5 will drive you un poco loco, my fine feathered friend.
Starting early is clearly important, but making sacrifices now for something in 45 years' time just goes against basic human nature. It's not that irrational either. 20% of Americans don't even live until they are 60, and many more would be too sick by that time in their lives to really enjoy themselves regardless of how much they have saved. Seeing the world and going out with friends in your 20s is worth a lot more to most people than having a really nice room in a senior living facility. Life is not guaranteed, and money spent on life experiences is rarely regretted. Young people are traveling overseas at much higher rates than people from generations before. 74% of millennials surveyed said that they never expect to be able to afford a home, and since they have nothing to save for, they would rather spend the money on experiences instead.
Some money to spare. When the economy's not growing, when wages aren't growing, people aren't thinking 50 years down the road. They're thinking, how do I stay in my home right now?
Some people would call this behavior irresponsible, and a young person's YOLO attitude may not be so cavalier when they are still behind a desk at 70. But there are other risks to planning for retirement that a lot of personal finance Puritans don't account for. The word on the street amongst financial analysts is that market returns over the past century were higher than we can expect in the future. They are often wrong about these sorts of things, but there is still no guarantee that sticking to a retirement savings plan will net you the results you are expecting when basing your calculations off past performance. So even if you are part of the 80% that don't die and the 60% that are still healthy enough to enjoy an active retirement, there is a risk that your nest egg won't be enough to support the life that you thought you would be living in your retirement anyway. If the goal of money is to maximize fulfillment in your life, then spending money now might be the safer investment. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, why can't people just do both? That's a good question. But the answer is that a lot of people just don't have enough money.
It's hard to save, like, in general, let alone for past a house and a savings account for emergencies.
There are certainly people that spend on things that are a complete waste of money, but millennials and younger generations are by and large more financially conscious than older generations. They know what they are spending their money on. They are just choosing different objectives. $100 a month after taxes could be all someone earning $50,000 a year has after covering their essential spending. Choosing a $1,200 summer vacation every year at that point isn't reckless spending. It's just choosing to live life. And yes, a lot of people don't even save up for these expenses. A LendingTree survey found that more than a third of people incurred vacation debt last year alone, averaging $1,249, almost exactly how much money the average 20-year-old would need to save to have a comfortable retirement at 65. The third reason that you will be working until you die is that even if you do choose to make sacrifices to save for retirement, you will probably mess it up anyway. The market may have returned an average of 10% per year over the past 100 years, but the average investor has only achieved a return of 4.25% in the same time according to research by Dalbar Inc. The first mistake people made was buying high and selling low as they bought into hyped-up positions. Cathie Wood's ARK Innovation ETF has generated similar returns to the S&P 500 since its inception, but it has been a net destroyer of wealth because most people bought into the fund when it was outperforming the market by a considerable margin. Cathie only made it into morning news segments after her fund had generated these returns, so most people only learned about ARK Invest as it was trading around its all-time high.
I think the Cathie Wood is the kiss of death.
The Innovation ETF was just an index of other companies that were also overhyped that a lot of people bought into after hearing about people turning small investments into millions of dollars. This goes back into human nature and the fear of missing out. If someone is getting rich doing something, we don't want to be left out. People also enjoy being part of it, even if it's just an investment trend. I pick on Meet Kevin a lot on this channel, but his viewership dropped significantly after he announced that he was selling the investments that he spent years hyping up. Those investments were very profitable for him, but people just weren't as interested in watching his content after he stopped reaffirming their beliefs that they were going to get rich buying his recommended investments based off terrible financial analysis. There is also an element of desperation in pursuing outsized investment gains. A lot of young people realize that they will never buy a house or even retire if they do everything right, so taking a risk on something that people on the internet are saying made them rich is worth a try. It's a lottery ticket that could cost thousands of dollars. For the same reason, people also try investing strategies like day trading, which investing gurus tell them could generate returns as high as $1,000 a day, but really, they are much more likely to lose all of their money. Fraud also hurts average investors a lot more than they realize. A lot of people trying to invest use services like FTX to gain exposure to cryptocurrency markets that were exactly the type of risky asset that could make people rich overnight. Those investors are unlikely to get their money back and could have lost a significant portion of their portfolio, which puts them behind financially, but also makes them more likely to say fuck it and give up on saving for retirement like the people in Reason 2. Another reason that people suck at investing is because they invest too much. Now, don't call me crazy just yet. But if you are investing as much as you possibly can into your portfolio, then you will find it hard to cover big expenses as they occur without selling off some of your investments. Unexpected expenses like being laid off work often coincide with down markets, which means you will be forced to sell your stocks at lows after purchasing them at highs. Normal people also get scared. Everybody talks a big game about long-term investing until they see their portfolio down by 20% in a week. The little voice telling you to cash out and reinvest once the market has bottomed is very hard to ignore. Some people listen to this voice, and most of them miss the bottom and end up buying back at a higher price than they sold at to save their account in the first place. The final reason that people can't invest for retirement properly is that it's boring and slow. Most of you can't sit through a 60-second TikTok unless there is a separate screen of Subway Surfer or Minecraft parkour playing in the background. Dollar cost averaging money into a retirement account for 45 years is a long commitment, and as the money piles up, it gets harder and harder to say no to all of the things that money could be doing instead of saving for a day you might be dead before. Whatever the reason for the average investor's terrible performance, it changes the retirement math a lot. To have the same $50,000 retirement income after taxes and inflation, someone getting a return of 4.25% would need $2.5 million in investments outside of their primary residence. Saving $2.5 million is also a lot harder with lower returns. If someone made market returns and started saving for retirement at 20 years old, they should only need to save $100 a month, which is not as easy as it sounds, but with some discipline, can easily be done by most people. But using these more realistic numbers, they would need to save $1,500 a month or $18,000 a year, which is not possible for someone earning $50,000 a year, and anybody earning more than that would have to be willing to spend a lot less in retirement than they did while they were working. How much money would you need to buy the American dream? Not how much would you need to make in order to afford the repayments on the American dream. How much would you need to buy the house, the 2 cars, the family, and a basic vacation every year? I know it's not going to blow your mind to find out that these supposedly vital ingredients to a good life have gotten kind of expensive, but it has reached a tipping point. The American dream is not dead, so much as it's an extreme luxury in many parts of the country that can now cost as much as $10 million to afford. That's more than most of us will ever earn in our lifetimes before taxes, interest payments, and basic essentials like food. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but holding on to the traditional financial wisdom of what you ought to have in life is now permanently out of reach for most people. And as more Americans realize this, it's fundamentally reshaping our economy.
Whether or not to have children, it's a topic these young minds discuss and contemplate.
Aaron, his wife Celia, and their 2 children have lived in this parking lot outside of Seattle for the past 9 months.
Workers carry $6,000 of credit card debt, while the average American has almost $8,000 worth.
This household configuration of dual income,
partners living alone without children is on the rise.
So, there are 3 points to this video that are each obvious by themselves, but get really interesting or worrying when you think about them all together. The first point is that the typical American dream has gone from an affordable lifestyle that even someone with a basic job could afford to live to an extreme luxury that even professional dual-income households are struggling to keep up with. The second point is that alternative lifestyles that used to be considered extremely luxurious have become way more affordable than a cookie-cutter suburban home with a 30-year mortgage. And the third point is what happens when people are making the logical choice and picking the better life for themselves. Now, I am calling it the American Dream because it looks better in the title of a YouTube video. But let's be honest, the story is the same around the world, and some places have it even worse than us. According to data from the US Fed and the US Census Bureau compiled in the Case-Shiller Index, the average cost of a home in the US is now more than 7.6 times median combined household incomes. That's now significantly higher than it was in the lead up to the global financial crisis, an economic meltdown enabled by housing speculation. If you think that's bad, spare a thought for the UK, which has lower wages but similarly priced homes, or Canadians, who, according to data compiled by Financial Samurai, have on average 10% less disposable income but live in houses 75% more expensive. New mortgage rates are also at the highest point they have been since the year 2000, when home prices were only 4 times household income. The average person, even if they have a full-time working partner, cannot reasonably afford to purchase an average home at current prices with current interest rates without paying more than half of their before-tax income in interest. That's before principal repayments on the loan, and before income tax. In reality, the average bank wouldn't even write this mortgage because it would be financially irresponsible. Now, housing is expensive. You don't need me to tell you that. But every other part of the American dream has somehow become even more expensive. The cost of a car, a basic college degree, insurance, and medical care have all outpaced inflation, which is also at decade highs. The only way to keep up with these prices is to be benefiting from them. Every chart related to your personal finances is up and to the left. But investment asset classes are up even more. The average house is now earning more than the average American in capital gains that are taxed more favorably, and the stock market continues to break new records. Adjusted for inflation, household incomes have increased by 20% since 2005, but the Nasdaq is up by 340%. People who have had time to amass assets or children who are lucky enough to open an account with the First National Bank of Mommy and Daddy are the only people left who can afford the trappings of the middle class. But this isn't yet another video telling you how financially f***ed you are. I actually have good news, which is that more young Americans than ever are opting out of the American dream as the price to buy a rundown family home can buy them a much better lifestyle by just rejecting traditions. There's one expense that has grown faster than all others, so much that it has become a status symbol even though it's technically free, and that's having children. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the inflation-adjusted cost of raising a child has increased by more than 50% since 2000, and some of the biggest expenses are now 250% of what they were 24 years ago. This data was collected for husband and wife families, so it averages out the cost of one partner needing to take time off work to look after children. The reason this is happening is because less people are having children. Young working professionals earn too much to be eligible for most child subsidies, but too little to really afford to raise children. The only people that can afford to have children are very wealthy people who don't care about spending thousands of dollars a year on the best preschools and paraphernalia for their child. This means that only expensive, high-end services catering to the children of affluent families can count on a reliable stream of business, so the expensive options are the only ones that last in the market. There is also a large group of people with lower incomes that still have a lot of children, but according to the US Census Bureau, that's partially why America has higher rates of child poverty than elder poverty. A study by the Tax Foundation found that married couples with children were the fastest shrinking group in middle-income percentiles because people couldn't afford to raise children. The Tax Foundation is a think tank that lobbies for lower taxes and lower government spending, so they might have an agenda with this report. But the numbers don't lie. People want to have children, they just can't afford to. Because even though it was something that people just assumed they were going to do in previous generations, it became one of the most expensive luxuries in our modern world. But just as everything you need to live a normal life is becoming prohibitively expensive for normal people, previously luxurious alternatives are becoming much cheaper. Remote work has allowed a lot of young people to get a job or sometimes multiple jobs at the same time and then do them from anywhere in the world. Traveling the world full-time or living in a cheap but exotic destination was the reserve of the jet-set class just a few years ago. But now almost anybody can do it while saving more money than they can get in a major city. These so-called digital nomads have gone from a small niche group to a major component of the workforce in less than a decade. A survey conducted by the workforce intelligence firm MBO Partners and published by the Harvard Business Review found that 17.3 million American workers now describe themselves as digital nomads, representing a 150% increase since 2019 alone. In this survey, digital nomads could include anybody from the tech worker sailing around the world, submitting their code once a day via Starlink, to a traveling nurse living out of a van, to someone who simply moved to a more affordable city temporarily to work remotely. In their research, the team for HBR found that the number one reason that people were pursuing this unrooted lifestyle was because they couldn't afford a more typical way of life. And if they were going to be uncomfortable both physically and financially, they would rather be uncomfortable while seeing the world. The sacrifices that you need to make to hit the road are much smaller than they used to be too. Remote jobs are still hard to land, but they are not nearly as hard to find as they used to be. Some people in remote work heavy fields like technology, data, or media creation have even created forums about doing multiple full-time jobs at the same time to make several full-time incomes. Living in a different country has also become a lot easier. Some popular centers with budget-conscious digital nomads are safer, cleaner, and have better amenities than American cities that are unaffordable. Some countries are so welcoming to young remote workers that they have even started offering digital nomad visas to simplify the legal and tax considerations of working in another country. Even if you feel lonely and want to see your friends and family frequently, saving $2,000 a month on rent buys a lot of plane tickets on budget carriers, since airline tickets are another thing that have noticeably become cheaper while everything else is getting more expensive. There are still hardships with living abroad, but they are getting easier every day, all while the American dream is getting harder. Now, not everybody priced out of living a normal life is pursuing such an adventurous alternative. There are some people that have been able to make the best of a bad situation, but there are far more young people across the world who are just giving up. In a time when the average American can't afford an unexpected $1,000 expense, luxury good companies selling $5,000 handbags or $10,000 watches are making record profits. This is because of a phenomenon known as doom spending. If you have worked hard in school, landed a good job, worked for 10 years, and are no closer to owning a home of your own, it's reasonable to want to see some kind of reward for all of your hard work. If you can't afford a sensible purchase to treat yourself, you could at least buy something that makes it look like you have some kind of financial stability in your life. It's not logical, but these companies don't make billions of dollars selling $2,000 shoes by appealing to logic. Doom spending is all a part of a bigger trend of people just giving up. In countries like China, where competition for housing and other essentials is even worse than here in America, there is a lying down movement. Young people are not going to work or school and are lying flat all day playing video games and relaxing. The trend was such a threat to the country that the government banned the term on all social media. And that might be the most important part of the dying American dream. What happens when everybody gives up on it? The American dream only works if most people believe in it to keep the system going. Maybe the boomers had it coming as they voted for policies that benefited them above their children, and now their children don't want to keep their system going. But I am sorry to tell you that most boomers are going to be dead before this really becomes a problem. It's hard for Americans to stop paying tax if they go and work in a different country, because we are one of the only countries in the world that still taxes its citizens even if they live abroad. But for other countries, losing workers who are moving elsewhere for a better life has already become a major drain on the systems that are funding their aging populations. Even if young Americans are trapped by Uncle Sam, they may not pay him as much. To be comfortable in a city like San Francisco, where the median house price is almost $1.3 million according to Zillow, experts estimate that you need an income of around $300,000 to live a comfortable middle-class lifestyle, if it could be called that. To sustainably fund that level of income in retirement, you would need invested assets of around $8 million outside your primary residence. The federal tax and FICA on that income for a single filer is $87,000 combined, but people live in San Francisco because they can earn that much in the area. But more people in these high-end jobs are willing to take a pay cut to work remotely in cheaper American cities, or a cheaper country. Google cut some of its workers' pay by 25%, and some of its workers were happy to accept it because they could work from somewhere that was 4 times cheaper. The federal tax in FICA on a salary of $225,000 is only $59,000, which means after state taxes, this remote worker would only be really taking home $35,000 less every year. But the tax system misses out on about the same amount. But when even these workers at the very top end of the labor market can't earn enough with their work to catch up to other people, you can't really blame them for giving up on the American dream. But all of this might just be part of a natural cycle that has been happening for hundreds of years. Go and watch my latest video on the depressing history of retirement to keep on learning how money works.